Throughout history, humanity has grappled with profound questions about existence, meaning, and the divine. Up until about 30 years ago, atheism has been defined as the active belief that God does not exist. A new definition has come on the scene describing atheism as the lack of belief in God.
You keep using the word. I don't think it means what you think it means.
Do atheists merely lack belief in God, or is there something more devious at play? Stick around to the end to see the payoff for the atheist in redefining atheism from an active belief that God does not exist to a passive lack of belief in God. If someone lacks belief in something, what does that tell you about the real world? Nothing. It just tells you something about the atheist's psychological state. To lack a belief about God's existence is merely the absence of the proposition God exists in the atheist's mind.
That's just like your opinion, man.
There's a stark difference between a psychological state and a truth claim. Only the latter can be verified as true or false. A psychological state just is what one has or does not have mentally. If the atheist responds that belief in God is merely a psychological state, they fall into a dilemma. Firstly, if belief is a psychological state, it logically cannot have a truth value, rendering discussions about its truth or falsehood nonsensical. But if they counter theistic arguments, they implicitly make truth claims which contradicts their definition of atheism. Alternatively, if atheists accept atheism as a truth claim, the belief that God's existence is implausible, they must then provide evidence to support it. What kind of atheist are you? One that views atheism as a psychological state, or one that sees it as a claim to truth? If atheism is a psychological state, your position lacks logical consistency when engaging in debates about God. If atheism is a truth claim, you're standing on firmer logical ground, but now you are required to provide evidence for your worldview. If atheism is true, then the atheist should be able to answer the question, what best explains reality, atheism or theism? But they don't like taking on this question anymore. For instance, say the atheist takes the positive stance that materialism is true. There are no supernatural, spiritual, or metaphysical realities. If I simply state that I lack a belief in materialism, it does nothing to refute their arguments. It doesn't actually engage with the content that they may have put forth in support of their positions. In response, the atheist could say, "Great, what did you think about my arguments regardless of your belief that obviously isn't informed by reality, argumentation, or cause and effect relationships?" Likewise, the theist, when confronted with lack theism, can simply ignore the statement because it has no bearing on making claims about the real world. By broadly painting atheism as the lack of belief in a God, almost everything could be defined as an atheist. My car, my cell phone, this video, the White House. Everything that is not actively believing in a God is defined as an atheist. Atheists have done better. This new definition doesn't move the needle in one direction or another. Atheism is the positive position, as it has been defined for hundreds of years, that God does not exist. Not only that, but if an atheist states that evolution is true, we live in a multiverse, that the universe is eternal, that morals are subjective, they are stating positive beliefs to account for reality. As such, they bear the burden to prove it. Imagine a detective comes upon a murder scene and there's a dead body. Another cop suggests who the murderer is. The detective says, "No, it's not him." "Okay, how do you know that?" "I just lack a belief it's that person." That doesn't help us solve the crime. Both the theist and the atheist must offer answers to these questions. They both have the burden of proof to account for the furniture of reality. When we ask the atheist if God exists, they cannot reply with, "I lack a belief in God," logically. They can agree that God exists, disagree, then provide the reasoning for their disbelief, or they can respond with uncertainty. If you say, "I don't know," you're an agnostic. If you disagree with God's existence, you're an atheist. Atheists need to explain various phenomena. The universe's existence, its fine-tuning, the natural laws, life arising from non-life, consciousness, objective morality, logic, mathematics, personality, in particular to Christianity, historical events like Old Testament prophecy and the resurrection of Jesus. Atheism, and merely lacking a belief, is not a sufficient stance on matters such as the existence of God or the moral framework of secular humanism, most atheists' sacred texts. Atheists nowadays often assert that they don't need to provide evidence or arguments for their stance since they merely possess non-belief in God.
It's called a hustle, sweetheart.
But there is a huge difference between passive true non-belief and active disbelief. Atheists fall under the latter category. They don't merely lack a belief in God, they actively believe that God does not exist. You'll see it in the comments section of this video very soon. Why do they actively exert their lack of belief with such conviction, gusto, and ridicule? Because they're hiding something, and I'm getting close to striking gold, pulling the curtain back, revealing what's really going on. No author writes a book or engages in a debate about topics they genuinely have no beliefs or opinions on. The very act of atheists writing books or engaging in debates about God suggests they have a belief, even if it's in the negative, especially the negative.
Please, Mr. Bagginses, let us keep our precious, our Theism.
You need to rid yourself of its treachery.
Then let us be rid of it. Once and for all. Come on, Mr. Frodo. I can't carry it for you. But I can carry you. Come on!
I possess no beliefs about which cricket team is the best in India. I don't actively look for cricket teams to share my lack of belief against. That would be pointless, a waste of time, and exerting all too much attention for something I simply lack a belief in. No, if I actively sought to engage in debates, write comments, and convince people that they need to convince me of their theism, I'm actively disbelieving, and there's a huge difference. Sometimes atheists will talk about not having to prove unicorns, flying spaghetti monsters, or fairies in my crawl space. And they're right. No evidence is required to reject the existence of fire-breathing dragons that are invisible and undetectable by any scientific means. But the same can't be said for the belief in God. The existence of God is a belief held by a significant portion of the global population, as well as many supporting arguments and evidence. Rejecting a belief so widely accepted places the burden of proof on the one rejecting it. Since there exist powerful arguments in favor of God's existence, a mere dismissal without providing counter reasons seems intellectually dishonest. Atheists often claim they don't need evidence for God's absence, justifying their stance by stating that one cannot prove a universal negative. For example, the statement that there is no God. You can prove there are non-existent things. Take, for example, the existence of prehistoric dinosaurs. We can prove they don't exist. How about this one? There are no gods that can create a rock so heavy they couldn't lift it, though they be all-powerful. This, of course, introduces the logical impossibilities of contradictions. You can disprove a universal negative if the concept is self-contradictory. By the atheist's own logic, since atheism also constitutes a universal negative, it too is unprovable by their standard. Do you know what this reveals? It shows that atheists hold their belief without evidence. A self-contradictory position by their own standards. If atheists truly had a non-belief, they wouldn't even be part of discussions about God. But since they actively engage in conversation, it suggests a belief contrary to what most people accept. As such, they bear the responsibility to present their reasons for rejecting his existence, as well as how they account for the furniture of reality, rather than just dismissing the theistic perspective. Both atheism and theism are knowledge claims. Because of that, They both bear the burden of proof for the positive assertions about the existence or non-existence of God.
Every single claim put forward carries with it a burden of proof. Some God exists. That claim carries a burden of proof. No gods exist. That claim carries a burden of proof.
Atheism is not the default stance that many atheists attempt to hold. If there were a default, it would probably be agnosticism, which is the position of not knowing whether God exists or not. Atheists must provide reasons for believing God does not exist, while theists must provide reasons for their belief that he does. And now for the reasons behind the redefinition of atheism. There's a payoff for the atheist in redefining atheism from the active belief that God does not exist to lacking a belief in God. It has to do with the burden of proof. If someone makes the claim, they have the responsibility, the burden of proof, to prove it. Deathly afraid of taking on the burden of proof, atheists protect the precious at all costs. If they can get away with defining atheism as the lack of belief, then it's up to the theist to provide their evidence, argumentation, the burden of proof, and the atheist can sit back and ridicule every piece of evidence offered based upon their own psychological state of lacking belief, regardless of if they should or should not believe in God. Do better, atheists. Take courage and provide a robust philosophical treatise for why your worldview best accounts for the furniture of existence. Heck, challenge the very premises of the furniture I've listed in this video. Argue, offer evidence, go beyond lacking belief, and hold fast to a strong belief. Exhaust the best arguments on both sides. If you're an atheist and you want to level up your game, I encourage you to look into the atheistic works of J.L. Mackie's book, The Miracle of Theism, and Michael Martin's book, Atheism, A Philosophical Justification. If you're a theist, may I suggest those books to familiarize yourself with the argument, as well as Swineburne's book, The Existence of God. As always, we should all be reading our Bibles. It's the world's #1 all-time bestseller about the most influential person to ever live. It's Jesus, silly atheists. The most influential person to ever live is Jesus. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one. I lack a belief that I'll see them in the next one. They might see me, but I won't see them. You know what I mean? Like, do I lack a belief?